Goldilocks reigned again today on the back of an unbelievably tame inflation report. Listen, folks, no matter how you slice the inflation pie, core or headline, there has not been any for 3 months. I want to go to my great pal, Don Luskin, who is going to comment on the end of inflation as we know it. Don.
Larry, there's a reason they call it Goldilocks. That's because it's a fairy tale, all right? Don't believe this. Fine, we've had a couple months of tepid inflation numbers because oil has been down big in the last 3 months. That doesn't mean that the underlying causes of inflation have gone away. We have a Fed that's been too easy for too long, and inflation is still in an uptrend. This doesn't change that.
Don Luskin, let's see. I know what a fan you are of the bond market, okay? That's been your principal critique.
Yep.
Bonds don't work. But really, when you look at the bond market, what you're looking at here, first of all, the Fed funds rate is probably too high by as much as 50 or 75 basis points. When you look at inflation spreads from the inflation-adjusted bonds, what you see is that they have come down markedly over the course of this year, and the real federal funds rate now is above 3%, which historically is pretty tight, Don. Don't you want the Fed to finally say uncle?
I don't think so, Larry. The way I understand the way bonds have behaved most of this year is tick by tick. They have tracked futures markets expectations for Fed easing in 2007. And all that today's inflation news did was take away some of the case for the Fed tightening rates. Nothing in today's news said anything about the Fed lowering interest rates. And that's why bonds were unchanged today, despite this seemingly great news for bonds. That's why I came on this show 2 weeks ago and said, sell bonds. That was the very top. That was 20 basis points ago. And what should have been the best news in the world for bonds, zero inflation, didn't move them a bit.
Yeah, but gold fell a couple of $100 today, didn't it? I mean, $12. That's a big move for gold. Gold got slammed today on this news. That's a leading inflation indicator.
I take your point. I've been the one who's been talking about gold as the big evidence all along, and that's got to be respected. But I have to tell you, gold and the dollar breathed a big sigh of relief today, not because of the inflation news, but because the Paulson-Bernanke show in China ended up with a big nothing instead of some dumb bilateral agreement to devalue the dollar and revalue the yuan. And thank God for that. And if that means 12 points off the gold price, then that's fine.
All right. Well, I agree with you about that China thing. I don't know what Bernanke's giving him lousy advice. Telecoms up 31%. Yep. Now, I just read your latest research report, which was really great, and you talk a lot about the potential risk of congressional regulation or re-regulation of telecoms, net neutrality, and so forth. Can you give us a pencil sketch on this?
Basically, net neutrality means slapping all kinds of new regulations on access and pricing for the new generation of broadband networks that cable companies and telephone companies are trying to build all over the United States, such things as fiber to the home, the thing that's going to create a flood of bandwidth for you and me and everybody. We've got to let these network operators make a profit on it. But there are a bunch of populist Democrats who are being egged on by MoveOn.org, who is being funded by Google and Microsoft and other internet content providers.
Why is Google? Why does Google want to regulate the internet?
Because a regulated internet keeps out competition that could topple Google from its dominant position. It not only keeps the telephone companies and the cable companies from competing with Google, but it keeps small upstarts like Google itself was just 5 or 6 years ago, from competing by being willing to pay a little bit extra for faster access speeds, which net neutrality would make illegal.
Who's going to win this?
All people have to go the same speed on the internet.
Who's going to win this, Don?
Well, I think it's a real danger. I'm afraid that the Democrats are going to win it because the White House is not engaged on this issue enough to veto it. I think it's a real risk to a sector that has moved too far too fast.
Kevin Martin, chairman of the FCC, I believe the meeting is December 20th or thereabouts.
Yep.
What do you expect out of the FCC?
I think they're going to approve the Bell South AT&T merger, but it's going to take an extraordinary step to do it. It's going to take the fifth commissioner, the Republican Commissioner McDowell, who has recused himself from this decision because of a tiny, unimportant, immaterial conflict of interest, to come back, as FCC counsel has said he can, and vote in favor of the merger. But as reported in the Wall Street Journal today, he's afraid to do that because he's afraid he'll be vilified and stoned in the public square by populist Democrats who will call it a corrupt decision.
Well, I would
all
wear,
he's trying to do is preserve a merger.
Stoned in the public square by a bunch of lefties, I'd wear that as a badge of honor and courage.